We are going to dive in to Unit 6, which is summarizing multiple references. And this is going to be training our students for that research process. And I don't know if you had the same experience that how many of you did that kind of big research project in school? Well, let me describe it so we know we're on the same page. It goes kind of like this. You get a subject you're going to research and a stack of books from the library, and you have a couple weeks to go through those books and make a stack of note cards, like a minimum number of note cards, a couple hundred or whatever, right? You then show those to the teacher, who looks at them and says, yes, very good. And now you're supposed to organize those note cards into an outline, and you have a couple weeks to do that. And then you turn in the outline to the teacher, who looks at it, puts his initials on, gives it back to you. And then you have a couple weeks to turn that outline into a paper. And that thing is, somewhere 5-7 pages long. You turn that in, teacher keeps it for a week or so, gives it back to you with lots of suggestions and edits and marks, and then you rewrite it and you turn in the final version. How many of you did that one time in school that you remember? Okay. Most everybody. Now keep your hands up. This is interesting. How many of you did it twice? 3 times. Yes. The hands start going down very rapidly at 3 times. And if you did it 3 or more times, I would almost bet a toenail that you went to a Catholic school or you were educated in the Northeast. Because if you were in my situation in Southern California, you could never have done this more than twice. We did it at the end of middle school, right? 8th grade, we still had that block period of English social studies, and the teacher could march us through this great thing. You couldn't do more than one a year because it took the entire spring semester. If you had an ambitious 7th grade teacher, maybe you did 2. But once we got to high school, nobody had time for that. I don't remember really writing anything very much in high school. Certainly not a big project that would have been that way. And so it's kind of fuzzy. Then we all get off to college, right? And we're supposed to write a paper. And everybody, all the kids are running around. Do you know how to write a paper? Is there a little book on how to write a paper? I think I'm supposed to have learned this, but I don't really know that I ever did. Can you relate a little bit? So what I love about Unit 6 is it takes that whole process, 8 weeks, and shrinks it into microcosm. I'm going to show you how to do a complete multiple reference research project, start to finish, 2.5 hours. Do you like the idea? Yeah, I think you will. All right, now we have some ideas from Unit 4 that we're going to carry over into Unit 6. One of those, obviously, is the topic clincher paragraph model from which we will write. The other idea, of course, is that we're looking to choose facts that are interesting, important, or relevant. And depending on the subject, you can influence the students to choose what they should choose if it's more important, or give them more freedom to choose what's more interesting. But we have an added step, and that is we're dealing with not just one source of too much information, we're dealing with multiple sources of too much information. So, basic start process would be the same. Beth, you have to write a research paper. Questions? On what? What? Elephants. Any more questions? How long should it be? Okay, so you get that. That's the same. And I say, I'm a very nice teacher, and it's due before you leave today, so you can do 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, or 12 paragraphs, your choice. 1, okay, fine. But what you'll see is it's the same thing, just replicated again and again. So just rebuild this list we had before. What were some of the topics that we discovered in the encyclopedia about elephants? We had, all right, kinds, or we'll call species, habitat, what? Diet, family, social groups, appearance, behavior, infrasound, communication, domestication, And there might be even more dangers, you know. Okay, so you've got quite a few. Would we be smart to tell a little bit about everything there's to tell about elephants in 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs? No. If we wanted to do that, we'd be writing a lot of paragraphs. So we pick one thing, right? We did species, so let's go with habitat, okay? Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to go and find some sources of information that would contain facts about the habitat of elephants. Now, we'll assume that there are still people out there who use libraries. They're becoming increasingly sparse. However, let's say that you found a couple real books, right? Just for purposes of hypothetical argument. And you want these books to be preferably at or below the reading level of the student. You want them to be fairly easy to read and understand. So you discover the book Elephants, A Child's Book of Pachyderms. There we go, A Child's Book of Pachyderms. Then you get another book, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Elephants But Didn't Have Time to Learn. You get a third source, Ranger Rick Special, Elephants, Elephants, and More Elephants. Okay, so kind of a combination of books or articles or even encyclopedia articles for younger children. And we'll talk about internet sources later on. But you get 3 or more sources of information about your subject, elephants, and hopefully it has information about your topic, habitat, okay? Now, you go to your first book, and you want to take a source outline about the habitat of elephants. And so you look in this book. Now, you want children to, I think they should still learn to use real books. How would you look in a book if you wanted to zero in on the part you need on that topic, habitat? What would you look at? Okay, table of contents. Or you could also teach them to check the index. If it were a children's book or encyclopedia, it might not have either of those, but it might have some subheadings, right? So you might also check subheadings. And if it was a short article, you might actually look in the paragraphs for the topic of each paragraph. But you want to be looking there to find the spot that has the information you want, which is pertaining to the habitat of elephants, okay? Now, you're going to want to collect up 3 to 5 facts, no more. 3 to 5 facts about the habitat of elephants. And here's the trick. If you get this, you can do this successfully. This is the trick. Are you listening? It doesn't matter how many facts are there. You still limit yourself 3 to 5. If there's 5 facts and you choose 5, that was easy. If there's 10 facts and you choose 5, that wasn't too hard. If there's 50 facts and you choose 5, that's tough. But even if there's 500 facts, you just want 5. Why would you want to limit so strictly? Well, you're going to have more sources to deal with, and your target is 1 paragraph, right? Length dictates structure. So you want to limit. So it doesn't matter. 5, 50, 500, 1 paragraph, 1 page, 1 chapter. You go for 5 facts on habitat, okay? Once you've done that, you go check your next book, table of contents, index, subheadings. Roman numeral is the same, topic is the same. You're looking for the same information on habitat, and you go and you find 5 facts, no more. Again, doesn't matter if there's 770 or 170, you're looking for 3 to 5. Go to your third source, Ranger Rick magazine. That's shorter, won't take quite as long to look through probably. Try to find 3, 4, 5 facts, but no more than 5. So then what you've got is probably somewhere in the range of 9 to 15 facts pertaining to the habitat of elephants, from which you're going to create a fused outline. This is the magic of the thing, the fused outline. Now, is it possible that some of the facts you have chosen are repeated? Yes, because if you thought it was interesting or important here, and you saw it again over here, you might have written it down a second time. If you did notice that you kind of wrote down the same fact twice, what might that tell you? Yeah, it's probably important, possibly even true. Is it possible that you might have some facts that seem very disconnected from the other facts? And you might say, well, that's just really different. It's almost like a different topic. We'll just kind of not use those, right? But when you have this array of facts, you're going to want now to create your fused outline by choosing the best of the best. Topic's the same, habitat of elephants, Roman numeral the same. Here, the number of facts would be dictated probably by the teacher. Right? If you're the teacher, you decide how many, just like Unit 4. We'll say for now, go 6 or 7. And here we put at the end of the paragraph the reminder word, clincher. And we put that there because this is the paragraph outline that we are going to write from. So we've got facts here, here, and here, and we want to organize them here. So we say, okay, let's choose the best of the best. Do I like this one? Yeah, that's why I picked it. Okay, let's move it down there. How about this one? Not really. How about this one? Oh, yes, that's a nice fact. Oh, and look, I notice that this fact over here is very closely connected with this fact there. And this one kind of has to go with that one. They're kind of together. How about that one? No, don't think so. This one? Maybe. We'll hold that in reserve. Let's see what else we've got. This is kind of a repeat of that. That's not interesting. Don't need that. This was a good one. Let's grab that, put that there. Don't need that. Let's grab that one and put that there. And it's between that, and this is more interesting, so we'll finish up with that. You see? So you're choosing a few from each of the source outlines and trying to organize them into a logical sequence in the fused outline. And then this is what you would write the paragraph from. And so you would then have your checklist, whatever style techniques you had learned that are easy, plus maybe one more, and you'd write your paragraph from that. And there you basically have it, a multiple source research reference report, start to finish. How long would it take? Well, let's think. How long would it take you to write 5 facts, 3 keywords for 3 to 5 facts from one source? What do you think? Yeah, it kind of depends if you do it the way where you read it all through and make notes, or you just do the boy way where you just grab the facts. But would you say maybe 15 minutes max? Max? If you couldn't extract 5 facts from this source in 15 minutes, you are probably using something you should not be using. Either it's too hard to read, or you're just getting distracted reading all sorts of other stuff, which isn't a crime, but practically speaking, that should kind of be the budget. 5 facts on one topic from one source. 15 minutes? Another 15? Another 15, max? Ranger Rick, that'll go fast. How about to scan your facts and put them in an order, copying them into a fused outline? Another 15 minutes, max? How about to write one paragraph from one outline with style techniques, easy +1? What do you think that should take? Half an hour to an hour? I usually budget an hour for a good paragraph. So you draft it, get some help editing, recopy, Maybe kids who are really slow or not focused, maybe an hour and a half. But honestly, you should be able to do that whole thing in 2 hours max, 2.5 at the extreme, right? Isn't that easy? And you see how easy it is when you compare it with that horrible note card experience. First of all, one of the huge problems, and there's still a major curriculum publisher out there that does this. They'll say, you know, make X number of note cards. You don't even know what your topics are, and you're just making note cards randomly. I mean, there's no focus, there's no direction. And then I remember the teacher's instructions. Teacher said, go home and spread out your note cards on the floor or on a table and try to organize them into topics. Well, there I am on the floor of my house, note cards going under the piano and out the front hall, and I'm looking at these things. What am I going to do with all these note cards? Fortunate for me, my mother rescued me, right, and walked me through that. But it didn't have to be that way, right? It was kind of cart before the horse situation. If you know what topics you want to collect information, and you know how much information you want to collect up, the whole thing becomes so much more manageable so quickly. Do you see? So that's a diagram, and we have it kind of in the book. If you look, where do we have this diagram? Kind of on page 88, you see this little diagram. If you wanted to do something longer, something of multiple paragraphs, then you could do that again for different topics, and again, for as many as you wanted. And I mentioned yesterday, probably you remember, that I said, I think that more frequent, shorter assignments are better because kids enjoy being finished, and it gives you a tighter teaching loop. But let's say you do want something big, right? Don't say to the students, all right, guys, we're going to do a great, huge, long thing on Egypt. It's going to be many pages and take several weeks. Nobody's going to have a very excited response there. I mean, maybe a few. But if you just said, hey, let's just do one short, one-paragraph report on the Nile River. Pass out some source texts, do that process, 2 hours, you're done. You're finished, Nile River, put to bed. A few days later, hey, let's do one on the Great Pyramids. Here's some source text, right? Walk through the process, one paragraph, pyramids, put it to bed, right? Next day, pull one out. Oh, mummification, that'll get the boys. Let's do mummification, right? And then you can do, and you could actually do this process as many times as you want. You could have 10 topics about ancient Egypt, right? And then you could say, hey, look at that. We've got 10 reports all about ancient Egypt, different topics. Let's put it all together in one thing and call it a great, huge, long thing, right? And this would actually teach one of the most valuable lessons that a lot of students never learn. Because see, we don't want them to grow up like us and go off to college and say, okay, I got that paper due tomorrow, I'd better start. But it's time for dinner. Come back to the dormitory about 9:30. You know, I really do need to start that paper pretty soon. People chatting, finally lights going off, and you do. You hammer through it, you somehow get that thing finished, you crash into bed at 3:30, you stumble out of bed at 7:30, you stumble into class, you turn in your paper, and you get a grade. And it doesn't even matter what the grade was. In your heart of hearts, you know you could have done better. If you had started a little sooner, you could have done a better job. But you didn't really know how to break it into pieces, right? It's kind of like you just had to do it all at once or it couldn't finish. So what we can do is we can actually model this for kids and say, okay, a great, huge, long thing is really just a series of smaller pieces that are put together. Do you see? So you might try that. Obviously, if you wanted to do 3 paragraphs, it would take you 3 times as long. So you'd have to budget somewhere around 6 to 7 hours for that in your school day or your week or whatever. And again, let me point out that this is Unit 6. It's not an end product. It's a step towards an end product, because what we would really like is to have an introduction, multiple topics, a conclusion paragraph, and that will come with Unit 8. So we're really just working on the guts here, and don't worry if it doesn't look like, the finished thing that everybody's going to judge. It's a process. This is one reason why I really recommend that even if you're teaching high school level, upper high school level, work through all the units. Unit 1 and 2 creates the discipline of doing keyword outlines. That carries on. Units 4 and 6, how to organize facts. A lot of kids, even if they're 17, haven't necessarily learned to do this in an organized, systematic way. Units 3 and 5, learning to ask those questions, right? So even if you're teaching older students, don't think that the earlier units don't have value, because they very much do have value. We have a few samples here that you might enjoy looking at. On page 89, we see the source text for what we have, these little mini books on different animals. And so the first source text came from Mini Book 1, Song and Flight Bird 2, Looney Submarine 3. And so this shows how the student wrote down 4 or 5 facts from each one, checked off the facts that they liked best, and put those into a fused outline. Couple things to mention. Number 1, these mini books, and you're going to see some. You get to use some for the practicum on elephants, no less. You get to see these mini books. I want to be perfectly clear. These mini books are not created to replace the library or more real source texts. They are designed to prepare students with something that is contrived to work pretty well, pretty easily, so that when they go use less prepared source material from books or internet sources or whatever, they'll have a better sense of what to do. So mini books are a little bit like the training wheels. I remember one of the most frustrating experiences I've seen someone have teaching was a good teacher, good heart. She was trying to do Unit 6. She was working in a school where most of her students, English was a second language. She was trying to work through the syllabus, and 5th grade, okay? So 70-80% Hispanic second language. She's in Unit 6. I'm coming to visit the school, and she says, oh, please, please, please come to my classroom and help me. I'm really trying to do Unit 6, and I'm so frustrated. It's so difficult. Could you please come and help? Absolutely. So I show up at her classroom, and this is the situation. She's been at this for 2 weeks. All of the children have a little stack of books about presidents, right? Some of them have the same book, which has information about all the presidents, and then some of them have information that is specific to their president. Most of these books they cannot read because their English is not quite good enough. So they open the book and they're just all confused. Every student has a different president, right? And she's been at this 2 weeks, and it's just a mess. Nobody in the room knows what to do. So she's running around like crazy, trying to help everybody all at once. And oh, it was just awful. I felt so bad for her. And I said, okay, I'll reteach this and you'll survive. But next year, this is how you do it. You get the source text that you know these kids can read. You give everybody the same president. You do everybody get the same topic on the same president. And you do it on the board here, and everybody write the same outline for the same topic on the same president, right? And get that far, and then let them try to write it out on their own. Okay. If that works, then get another topic on that same president and take them this far, do that together, and have them do this part on their own, right? And write it out. And then you'll have a second paragraph with a second topic on that same president. If that works, then get a third topic on that same president and let them try that whole thing on their own. And you get the materials that you know they can read, because they're your students and English is tough, so get things that'll work, okay? So that everybody has actually written the same 3 topics on the same president. Now save those topics for Unit 8, right? Save those 3 topics. They'll become a guts of a Unit 8 essay in a couple months. And if you have any time or energy left over, then let them all choose a different president, right? But the problem is, presidents are messy things, right? Their topics aren't predictable and organized, and you can't really handle John Quincy Adams in the same way you might handle Bill Clinton, right? So, and she saw the wisdom of it, but she just didn't realize that they would need that tight, close modeling. Do you see? So what we've got with the mini books here is materials that are contrived to have overlapping topics that are easy to read and use so that you can teach the process. And once the kids learn the process, then you can use some increasingly more diverse and maybe difficult to use source materials. Is that pretty clear? Good. Now, this idea, I was so envious of this idea. Sometimes you get somebody who's got such a good idea, you wish you had thought of it yourself, and you're envious, which is not a good thing. So I let it go, but I'm going to share it with you. Because this idea came from a 3rd grade teacher in Colorado, and I am convinced that 3rd grade teachers have to be masters of paper management, right? Because 3rd grade students are not naturally skilled at this. And you can imagine you're trying to get kids to do all this and the papers and the books all over the place. Plus, one of the things that I kind of don't like that a lot of classrooms kind of have, and I think aren't maybe the best, but you're stuck with it, are these little tiny desks. And you get these little tiny desks, and it doesn't work well with our system of writing because you want to have your outline here and your paper here and your word list here and your portable walls there. And, you know, no sane person would work at a little desk, you know, that big. But that's what we get in schools. So how do you help the kids? Well, this teacher was teaching the Unit 6, and he said, okay, I give the students an 11 by 17 piece of paper, right? And the first thing we do is fold it in half, taco style. Now that's if you're in Texas or Colorado, taco style. If you're in the Northeast, hot dog style, right? But you fold it in half, taco style. Okay, now the next step might take some time if you're doing this with 25 9-year-olds. But you want to fold it in thirds. So you try to teach them how to do that. And they fold it in thirds. Now you have what appears to be a square. Now, when you unfold your paper, you have 6 boxes, right? So, this is going to give you 6 places for outlines and things. Now, fold it up again taco style, and this is going to be the top of your paper. If it's open at the top, then this is the top. So, what you have here then is you have a space for source outlines, right? So you have a place for book 1, book 2, and book 3, right? Just like that. And then you can make your outlines. on your topic. Now, this is only taking up half your desk. You have room for your books on your desk because you've managed the paper this way. Okay, now you've got your source outlines. Now you unfold your paper, and it takes up your entire desk. But this is where you can create the fused outline in the middle. And you put the word clincher at the bottom of the fused. You see? So you do that whole part of the process, fusing the outlines on the paper. Then you have a couple extra boxes. And you can use these boxes for various things. One thing is if you're at the point where you want the students to create a bibliography and keep track of the names of the books they used, or the sources or the websites or whatever, this box could become a bibliography where they list those, because they're going to want to create a page at the end of their paper with the bibliography, or a little section at the end. And if you like, you can use the other box for a checklist. The kids can put their, dress-up checklist, openers, whatever they've learned. And they can just make their own checklist right there, right? Then you can fold this down this way, put this at the top of your tiny little desk, and you've got room for a piece of paper, and you can write your paragraph from the fused outline. Then, once you've written the paragraph, you can fold it up, paperclip it all together, and in the file, you have source outlines, fused outline, bibliographic information, drafts, all in a nice package. Isn't that cool? Yes, I am just envious. I did not think of that myself. So if you like to do that, with your students. Now, a couple things. I met a few teachers who said, well, I tried this, but the students really don't write on blank paper very neatly. And so she went ahead and actually put lines so the kids could fill in the lines. And you're welcome to do that. It's just photocopy expense, but it might be worth it. Another thing I would mention at this point, all throughout this course, through our student intensive and in all of the classroom supplements and theme-based writing lessons, we have printed checklists, okay? And we do this kind of because we think it helps people get started. But deep down in my heart, I don't really like giving the students the printed checklist because I think it can become a little bit of a crutch. This came clear to me when I was working with the Pasco School District. We were working very, very hard to get the 4th grade classes to score higher on the WASL test, the Washington Assessment of State Learning or Standards of Learning or something. And in Washington at that time, I don't know if they still do, but it was just kind of a ridiculous rule. When they gave the kids the test, they had to cover up all the walls, and the kids couldn't see anything that was on the walls. They couldn't have any references like a dictionary or anything. They just had to take this test completely blank. And these were, large percentage of second language and kind of a struggling population there. And I just thought, oh, it's criminal. It's just wrong. But that was what we were working with. And what the teachers noticed was they were giving the kids printed checklists every single assignment. But on that WASL, they couldn't give them a checklist. They couldn't look on the wall at their posters. And what happened was, out of sight, out of mind, the kids just kind of forgot about doing the style techniques. They forgot the rules. They forgot the stuff they had been learning because they hadn't really internalized it sufficiently, right? So while printed checklists are very nice and handy, I really like the idea of kids making their own checklist, because then they'll memorize it, they'll internalize it, it'll be more theirs, and then you just kind of, check it. It also allows you to customize the checklist more easily, right? And if each student kind of knows their checklist and knows what they should or should not put on, then you are, as Mrs. Ingham loves to say, teaching at the point of need, right? You're teaching exactly what they need to know at that point, and anything you buy, any textbook, any workbook, any curriculum, anything you ever buy to give to students or use with students is really only going to be as good as you are. Because one of the problems with a workbook, right, it's an oxymoron, workbook. It does no work whatsoever. See, it exists and it will go on at its happy little merry pace, completely oblivious to the needs of the child. So if you get a workbook that works, it wasn't because it was a great book, it's because you got lucky, right? The book happened to meet the needs of the child. But if you get a book that is, in anything, whether it's math or spelling or style checklist, if it's going too fast, it will frustrate a student, they'll start to hate that subject. If it's going too slow, it will bore the student, and they will start to hate that subject. So any material you ever buy, you must do the work because it won't, and you must adjust it for your students as best you can, right? You must be in control of the curriculum. Do not let curriculum control you. And that's a tough lesson to learn because, deep down we all have a little bit of insecurity, I think, and say, oh no, it must know better than me. But see, the fact is, it can't know your students better than you. You know your students better than anyone, and that's why I would encourage you to think about that. You want to teach them at the point of need, not going too fast, going too slow, materials they can't read, right? Materials that are too hard to use. So, in any case, that's kind of a long diatribe, but I think worth listening to, and that's why I'm kind of leaning towards trying to have the students create their own checklist on their own paper, and then attach this to their draft, and then when you read it or grade it or mark it or edit it for them or whatever you do with it, you can see this is what they were trying to do. Okay, it all makes sense. All right? So we tried to kind of reproduce that here on this page on the Unit 6 poster so that you would remember how to use this nice 11 by 17 format paper. We have student samples. The student sample of the loon call is on page 90. That corresponds with the fused outline on the previous page. Page 92 and 93, elementary, middle school. Here again you see that Unit 6 can be 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs. And so your subject here on page 92, Forts of Indiana, and there's 3 different forts in Indiana, 3 different topics. And this could be, as I said, part of a longer paper that would include an introduction, a conclusion, more background information, maybe a couple more forts for an expanded essay like that. In the case of this sample by Noel on page 93, the subject is owls, and then the 2 topics are physical characteristics and hunting habits, right? So there's 2 topics, 1 subject, 2 topics. This example by Connor is really 1 paragraph, and so the subject is Thomas Edison or the early life of Edison, and the topic is the same. So when you have 1 paragraph, subject equals topic. When you have multiple paragraphs, subject and then topics are under that as divisions. Then, if you really want to get into it, you can look at this very extensive sample, a high school student on page 94 and 95, where you have the source outlines, the fused outline, then written into the 3 paragraphs, and with all of the stylistic techniques marked there. You also notice that at the bottom of this paper, Emily has done an MLA style documentation. She has a quote in here in the 3rd paragraph about Travis saying, "I shall never surrender or retreat," blah, blah, blah. And then she puts where that quote came from in the MLA inline citation format, and then at the bottom, a works cited list. So we can talk a little bit more about documentation when we get to Unit 8, and you'll see more samples. And I'll talk a little bit more about that pathway. But for now, you can kind of just gradually smooth into it and see the examples there. All right, now we're going to do the practicum. And this practicum is going to give you a chance to go through this entire process, create some source outlines, create a fused outline. If you want to, grab a friend and talk it through to be sure you know what you're talking about. Write 1 paragraph on 1 topic pertaining to elephants, and use the full checklist, which can be found on page 107. So, in between page 96 and page 107 are the elephant mini books. Now, these mini books are designed to work like books. So, for them to make sense, you'll want to fold them in half. Now, here's the fast way to do this, as the kids who work in my office collating things have discovered. Fold them all at once, like that, and then pull them out, one at a time. And then what you will end up with is 5 folded elephant mini books, appropriately entitled things like Elephants, The Elephant Kingdom, If You Can Teach It, Warfare and Hunting, Elephants on the Skeleton Coast. They are also coded, and all of our mini books are coded so that they're easier to keep track of. LM stands for land mammals. The elephants are set 1, and then they are individualized A, B, C, D, and E. So we're just going to call them A, B, C, D, and E for now. And our first task is to find out what topics are available in which books. And this is a good exercise to help kids understand, okay, let's make a little chart here. List the possible topics, which sources have information on those topics. So let's kind of do this together just so we all get off on the right start. LM1A, now these mini books are written to have most usually topic clincher paragraphs that demonstrate the topic clincher rule. So they're kind of like mini chapters, but they're also paragraph size. And so you'll notice then that the topic sentence and the clincher sentence generally, not absolutely, but generally repeat or reflect 2 or 3 key words. So there's no table of contents, there's no index, there's no subheadings. We're going to have to go straight to the topic sentence to figure out what these topics are. But if we look at the first one, it says there are 2 elephant species. The clincher says, surprisingly, the 2 elephant species are entirely different. So you could easily conclude that this paragraph is about species. So I'll just make a little record up here for you. Book A contains species. How about the next one? Appearance. Appearance looks like appearance. How about the next topic? Infrasound and communication. How about the next one? Yeah, it looks like behavior. Are you with me on that? Peculiar behavior suggested. And if we look at the bottom, it has 3 very short sentences at the end. So this kind of doesn't, but let's put that for behavior. And then we go to the last one. In family behavior, elephants cooperative, kinship ties. So it's a little bit like behavior, but also could be considered family or social. So there's going to be sometimes a little bit of overlap. You just have to decide how do you want to categorize that. Okay, so book A has 5 topics of information. Let's take a look at book B. Elephants appear majestic, appear mammoth. Let's mark this one up as appearance. So book B. Next, species. 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 Third,
behavior.
A bit more on behavior.
Infrasound.
Elephant infrasound. A bit more on infrasound. Elephants need a kingdom. They like water. Oh, this is an example here, just to point it out to you, of that decoration called the dramatic opening closing. Do you remember that one? It's where you start with a very short sentence. So the very short sentence, elephants need a kingdom, the topic sentence is really the next one. They like water in their habitat. And then when you get to the end, you'll notice the last sentence is also a dramatic closing, leave the elephant kingdom alone. The clincher is really just inside that. Unfortunately, humans pursue elephants into the harshest, driest, and hottest habitat on Earth. You see? So this one will mark up to habitat. And we've now got 5 topics, 4 of which are overlapping. You see? All right. LM1C, if you can teach it. First paragraph looks like infrasound. Next paragraph, elephant behavior. You see how these are contrived to be easy to teach with? Third paragraph, obviously elephant species. All right, so species. Social group, herd, extended family. That's probably social group and family. And last one, domestication. So C there. All right, we're cooking. Let's go on to book LM1D. First paragraph? Okay, more in appearance. Next one. Families, matriarchal. All right, families. D. Next one. Females do the talking while the males listen. All right, D. Infrasound. And last, not last, but next one, society behaves cruelly. Yeah, we had family and social groups. Take a look at the clincher. Social behavior. Let's chalk that one up to behavior. That'll probably work there. Book D. And last one? Domestication. All right. Okay, 5th and final book, LM1E. All right, social group. Next, appearance. Okay, looks like, yeah, probably behavior. Next one, elephants must be caught to be domesticated. All right. And lastly, desert habitat. D. Okay. So, it appears here that there's one subject we should probably not try and do, and that would be what?
Habitat.
Diet. If there's information about the elephant's diet, it is contained, kind of needle in a haystack, somewhere in these other topics. So that would be a much more complicated research because you'd have to sort through all the other topics for miscellaneous facts about diet. So it could be done, but it's not a good place to start. So we'll remove that as a possibility. Also, you already wrote a bit about infrasound in Unit 2 practicum, so don't choose that one. And then we actually did write together the bit about species, so we've got that done, so don't choose that one. Instead, choose from habitat, family, social groups, appearance, behavior, and domestication. Now, if you choose habitat, what do you notice? Only 2 sources. So if you're feeling exhausted, tired, brain dead, and really want to just get this done with, that might be the one for you because it's less to have to sort through. However, if you do go with habitat, you probably want to try to get 4 or 5 from each so that you've got 9 or 10 to choose the 6 or 7 you need. If you go with behavior, what do you notice here? There's 5 possible sources. So what you might do is try to choose maybe 2 or 3 from 5 sources, right? Then you still end up with 10 to 15. That's a good range. Or what you might do is notice that one of the books just, you don't like it, you don't have to use it. There's no rule that says you have to use every available source, right? So the rule is multiple source, right? Summarizing from multiple sources. More than one would be that, right? So you can choose however many you want to use. And the page 96 is available for you to write your keyword outline, source text, and fuse outlines. But I will say, it looks a little small. So unless you're good at writing very small, this might be a little difficult. And using your 11 by 17 paper or a different piece of paper might be more convenient. You'll also notice then that the practicum would require you to add a decoration into your paragraph. So you're going to have all 5 dress-ups, the variety of sentence openers, 1 decoration. You're going to follow the topic clincher rule and highlight, box, or bold the keywords in the topic clincher which repeat or reflect. All right? And then, just so you know where we're going with this, you're going to have 3 paragraphs about elephants, and we'll be able to let you put those into kind of a Unit 8 format with introduction and conclusion for the practicum later on. So you've got most of the work for that one already finished. All right, so we'll give you a little bit of time to work on this here. Then we'll debrief, have some questions, and move on from there. All right? So you've got the Unit 6 practicum completed, I hope, with the fused outline. And most of you have gotten into writing the paragraph. You've got your checklist handy. So if you didn't finish here today, it's homework for you. But now you know the good value of doing your homework because you learn it all better. So you can finish that up at home. But I think you've got a taste of the process, do you? Do you like it? Yes. It's very, very smooth and clean. And you can use, increasingly difficult source materials. One lady asked me a very good question during the practicum here. She said, when do we stop giving or choosing or helping the kids with the source materials? And I noticed that it's a little bit harder now to help kids use materials because one of the things that they believe is that everything you need to know can be found out at the last minute on the internet. And unfortunately, this is neither true nor helpful, but it is the mentality of just about everyone I know, maybe 14 and younger. So let's talk just briefly about a couple of the alternative sources to books. Oh, I caught this, and I apologize seriously. I hope this did not mess anyone up. I put D for habitat, but there's no information about habitat in book D. You would need to look in book E for information about habitat. Hopefully you caught that and you didn't get 2 paragraphs that were completely disconnected and be very confused. I do apologize. So that's the proper way to go. But one thing that I might point out that's available are the electronically published sources of information that traditionally we might have got in a library, periodicals, and some of them are very, very good, very useful. For example, the entire National Geographic, 100 and some years, 1,200 some issues, I believe, are archived on one DVD-ROM, if you can believe that. Amazing. And what's great about electronically published information is it's easily searchable, right? So you can have your, your collection of all the National Geographics ever published, and you go look up any place, any person, any time, any animal, you probably find something useful there. Whereas looking through do you remember it? The Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature. You got to be really old to know that term. But that was kind of overwhelming, and you needed training just to be able to do that. Now it's just so much faster and easier. Online published encyclopedias, Britannica.com, I think I mentioned that, has very, very good resources that are easy to use, easy to search. Britannica is very reliable and has lots and lots of useful links to other sources. Some of you may be familiar with the LexisNexis database, which is the database of a lot of academic publications that are going to be particularly useful for older kids, teenagers doing research. We make that available to the debate clubs, so they have the LexisNexis database available there. Another caution, though, is things on the internet really need to be filtered, not just in terms of being safe, but being verifiable. So I do a little talk with kids on, what kind of websites would you trust, right? So if it says nationalgeographic.com, that's probably a good one. If it says myfavoriteanimal.blogspot.com, you might be a little more careful. Smithsonian might have a good ring to it. .gov, well, your call. But helping the kids sort through this, because they don't necessarily have an instinctive knowledge of what types of sources are going to be more reliable and more useful than others. The other problem that I see happening a lot is the temptation to just copy and paste is so overwhelming that, what do you do with that? And the problem is kids don't think that's wrong. They don't believe there's anything ethically wrong with just cutting and pasting and putting a document together and turning it in for a paper. So in terms of our training of kids and helping kids, here's what I strongly recommend for sources you find on the internet. Print it out. Print out the sources, print out the information, print out the references, whatever you're using. Go away from the computer, sit at a table with paper and pen, and do what we're doing here. And you will train them to be able to use the information and remove the temptation of cut, paste, click, thesaurus, clock down, right? Because I'm sure there are kids who turn in reports for school and they haven't typed anything except maybe their name. They can do this. And they're digital natives, these kids now. Middle school, elementary school, they were born into this world and they are natives. It is their first nature to know how to manipulate information and data and control it far better than you or I ever will be able to do. So we kind of have to acknowledge that. But my advice there would be help them find pages, help them find sources and pages that are going to be reliable and factually valuable, and then print it out, go away from the machine and do it on paper, and then go back and type it in. If you can coach your kids that way, I think they will get a better education out of it all and be better prepared when they go off to college and whatnot. One last little source of information that's kind of interesting would actually be kind of some field research. My observations about something. Now, sometimes this would be possible. For example, you're studying the Civil War, writing a paper about Gettysburg, and you happen to be in Pennsylvania. You can go and see it firsthand. You can watch videos that they put on to teach you about that. Maybe you're studying elephants. You want to look at the habitat. Go to the zoo and see what kind of habitat do they create for the elephants at the zoo. But if you're in Fairbanks and there's no elephants handy, you could still watch a video, right? So video information allows kids to make observations even though they can't go to that place or see that thing. And kind of in line with this, another really fun source is to interview an expert. I had a student in Idaho one time. He was writing this thing about bees, and he found 2 facts about this one really weird, obscure bee. And he wanted to write a whole paragraph about this thing, but he only had these 2 facts. And so he said, what do? I want to write a whole paragraph from my paper, but I only have 2 facts about this one bee, and I can't find anything else. And I searched the internet. I couldn't find anything else. I said, well, I don't know. I mean, you can't make up a bunch of facts and just add it in, so I'm not sure. But Washington State University down the road in Pullman has a big agricultural department. Why don't you call over there and see if there's anybody who knows anything about bees? Well, this kid got on the phone with his professor who did his doctoral work in bees and had a book on his shelf and knew about this thing and pulled the book off and read to the kid over the phone and told him a few things, right? And so then the student was able to put into his paper these facts that he had acquired essentially by interviewing an expert. So that's kind of a nice way to think about it as well. So lots of possible sources that can be integrated and used. And I think it's great preparation for when you have to go off and write a big long paper, do serious research, even graduate level work. Having done this when you're young, it becomes kind of natural or instinctive for you. Any questions pertaining to Unit 6 or what we have done so far? No? Either everything is perfectly clear or you are getting a bit tired. Let me just remind you that the practicum assignment would be to complete the paragraph, use the checklist, and you can put that in your portfolio if you want to submit for accreditation later on. We're going to finish up here with just a few minutes to talk about some of the advanced dress-ups. So if you look on page 171, you will notice these advanced dress-ups. Now, what I would say is that it is not necessary that you ever actually teach these if you don't want to, if you don't need to, if you never get students that are ready for it. It's not a problem. These are kind of just optional little bonus dessert items in the stylistic world, things that you can throw at the advanced student to kind of keep them challenged, or things you might like to try out in your own writing. The first item we see here would be duals. Duals are when you would use 2 of one thing kind of in parallel. In fact, oftentimes people who teach writing will say parallel construction. So you'd have 2 of something. We kind of focus on using dual verbs, dual adverbs, dual adjectives. So that would be a strong one or 2. And what's interesting is you can have a weak verb, Joe came into the room, doesn't give much image or feeling. You could change that into a stronger verb. Joe strode into the room, Joe loafed into the room, Joe sneaked into the room, Joe rushed into the room. That gives you a stronger image or feeling. But if you add a second verb, Joe came in and sat down. Now you actually get a better picture because you've got another verb, even though neither of them are particularly strong. So you can, at some point, give kids the option to use a strong verb or dual verbs, or you can require the advanced students, if you like, you have to do dual verbs. So that would be two verbs on one subject with two verbs, right? Again, you want to be careful that your duals aren't too repetitive like the triples, right? He sat down and plopped into the chair. Not going to work, right? But he plopped into the chair and leaned back. That might work, right? Same thing with the adverbs and the adjectives. When you mark the dual verbs, I usually underline from the beginning of the first verb all the way to the end of the second verb in the sequence, because you might have direct objects in between, but it could still be duals as long as it's one subject. If you had a subject and a verb and then a clause ending with another subject and a verb, that wouldn't count as a dual pattern. Does that make sense? I think there's some samples here of these advanced dress-ups. On 187, there's some examples of some duals there. Now, one of the interesting things that might happen to you, if it hasn't happened already, you might discover that Microsoft Word grammar checker, right, will sometimes prompt you to change your which into a that. Has that happened to anybody? You've noticed this. Now, there's a couple reasons that it does that, and it's trying to help you say what you really want to say. And it has to do with essential and non-essential clauses. I guess the best example I've seen, short and easy to think about, is this one. Lawyers who are crooks should be jailed. Now, if you type that into Microsoft Word, it's going to want you to change it. And what it's going to want you to do is to either add in 2 commas right there, or change the who to a that. And the reason is, without the change, it's a bit unclear. It's a bit ambiguous. Lawyers who are crooks should be jailed. Now, does that mean all lawyers are crooks? Or does it mean only lawyers that are crooks? Now, if you said lawyers that are crooks, then it restricts it to, it means that all lawyers are crooks. It's non-restrictive, right? Lawyers that are crooks. Well, reverse that. With that, it means that only the lawyers that are crooks should be jailed, right? So it becomes restrictive. However, if you keep the who and you put in the commas, now you're saying lawyers who are crooks, every last one of them, should be jailed. All lawyers should be jailed, right? So that's an example, and I think there's a discussion in here of this little problem of what I think used to be called restrictive clauses, but now is more often called essential clauses, on page 173. The who-which clause punctuation. Here, our wonderful grammar guru on our team has clarified this. Non-essential who-which clauses take commas. So spiders, which often terrify little girls, are usually harmless. You could take out the which often terrify little girls and you've still got a valid sentence. Therefore, it's a non-essential clause. Spiders are usually harmless. However, if it's essential to the meaning or the completeness of the sentence, children who tease frightened girls are cruel, then you don't put the commas in. Do you see? So Microsoft Word is helping you avoid that problem of knowing whether you should put commas or not by helping you change the word to that. Although Dr. Webster feels that Americans kind of overuse the word that, and who or which are older words and more formal in a certain way. So we're going to stick with the who, which, and just try to teach and understand as we're able the use of the commas for clarity's sake. And that should be sufficient. Now, there's another aspect of the who, which clause that comes up here. And I'll mention this before we get to the noun clause. And that has to do with the problem of unnecessary whiches. So, a sentence like this. Our teacher, who is a hard-working, dedicated educator, won Teacher of the Year award. All right, so let's say you had something like that. Our teacher, who is a hardworking, dedicated educator, won, stick a "the" in there, the Teacher of the Year award. Now, this is a case where you could actually remove the who is, replace it with a comma, and you would have a better sentence. Our teacher, comma, a hardworking, dedicated educator, comma, won the Teacher of the Year award. Do you see how that would work? Now, this is called grammatically an appositive. That's where you rename something. My mother, comma, a hardworking, tireless homeschool mother, comma, stays up until the wee hours of the morning designing fascinating science experiments for me to do, period, right? That type of thing. And so what we can do is we can teach this as kind of an advanced idea. Once you understand the who, which clause and you can put it in, you will notice that when it is followed by a be verb, is, are, was, or were, it can very often be removed, replaced with a comma. If you have one comma, you probably need another comma on the other side, and you can have what we call the invisible which. So there is a discussion here on the invisible which on page 172. So you can work with that a little bit as well, and as an advanced dress-up, you can allow them to make that a substitute for a regular who which. So that's what I usually do. Teach the invisible and then say you can do a regular who which or you can do an invisible who which. It'll count for either one. And then again, if you study Latin, you learn all about appositives and why they're called appositives. All right. Now the teeter-totters. That's the next one on the list here, the teeter-totters. Now, the teeter-totters are kind of a nice thing to illustrate how the adverb clause balances with adverbs and rests on the pivot of a verb, and how a adjectival clause balances with adjectives and rests on the pivot of a noun. So, the diagram kind of looks like that. For the adverb clause, on one side, you would have dual ly adverbs, and on the other side, you would have an adverb clause. Which words give you the adverb clause? Do you remember? Yes, the when, while, where, as, since, if, although. You need to memorize that. Yeah. So when, while, where, as, since, if, although, because, whereas, unless. Actually, you get the wub if you do it in the right order. It looks cute. Whereas, unless, and because. Asia.wub. So let's make one together so you kind of see how this works. The pivot is the verb. So someone give me a verb. Any verb? Trotted. Okay, now we're going to need two ly adverbs that would describe the trotting. Briskly. But carefully, all right? What did this trotting, please?
Horse.
The horse? Briskly but carefully trotted. Now we need a when, while, where, as, since, if, although. We might want an object in there too. Trotted where?
Well, when it headed home, when it was turned toward home.
Trotted. Okay, well you could put a prepositional phrase in there if you wanted to. Across the field or whatever. When it was turned toward home. Okay, that'll probably work. So you see how it's laid out. You've got the two LYs, the verb is the pivot, and the when is the dress up. Now this is not a separate dress up. This is not something you add to the checklist. It's just a particular use of two techniques in one sentence in a particular way as a special challenge. That's right. Everyone try and rate yourself adverbial teeter-totter there, okay? If you can't think it through from the beginning, then go ahead and just start with the verb and work out from the middle. But go ahead and try to write one. We'll see how it works. Joe carefully but eloquently completed his speech for the tournament since he had hoped to have it memorized by Saturday. So you have that teeter-totter, but there you have a little bit more in between. So as long as you've got that adverb clause somewhere on the side, that's a good teeter-totter. Anyone have one they'd like to read to us?
The boy cheerfully and excitedly demonstrated his new Lego contraption as his mother proudly looked on with amazement.
Oh, beautiful. The boy cheerfully, what was the two?
Cheerfully and excitedly.
Cheerfully and excitedly demonstrated his new Lego contraption as his mother looked on. As his mother proudly looked on with amazement. Very nice. That's a good one. And very typical of a scene at home. Huh? Yeah, good. Anyone else? Got one? Yes, Janet.
Mrs. Simpson gently but firmly ended recess because a tornado was coming. Oh my goodness.
Okay, that's an Oklahoma one there. Just gently, but yeah. Okay, so that's that teeter-totter. Moving on to the similar construction is the adjective teeter-totter. And this is where you're going to balance the dual adjectives against the adjective clause. Which words give us the adjective clause? Who, which. So this is the who, which. And the pivot becomes the noun. So someone give me a noun. Any noun? Balloon. Okay, we need two adjectives to describe the balloon.
Bright blue.
The bright, and nice alliteration to boot there, huh? Blue, balloon. Okay, now we put the which. Now tell me something more about the balloon. The bright blue balloon which floated into the sky, I guess. I don't know. Okay, now, this whole thing right there could become the subject of the sentence. I guess you'd start with the. The bright blue balloon which floated up into the sky was a metaphor for his lost hope. Okay? It could also become the object of the sentence. The little boy cried because, right, his bright blue balloon. Or I saw a bright blue balloon. That would be a direct object. I saw a bright blue balloon which floated into the sky. You see? So that whole thing, once you've got it, can be either in the subject or it can be in the predicate. Right? Your choice. So go ahead and make yourself an adjectival teeter-totter, if you can. So you see how it looks like a teeter-totter there with the markings. That's where we got the name. Anybody want to read theirs? Jean?
The soprano sang the complicated, magnificent aria which she had practiced for many weeks.
Beautiful. The soprano sang the complicated, magnificent aria which she had practiced for many weeks. Good. Anyone else have one? One more? Joanne?
The crying, confused kitten, which meowed loudly, attracted her mother.
The crying, confused kitten which meowed loudly attracted her mother. Very nice. Love it. Now, some of you might have noticed that when you put adverbs or adjectives together, you have some options. With adverbs, you pretty much will use and, yet, or but. Right? He quickly but carefully completed the project. He thoroughly and excitedly washed the dishes. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Sometimes I've seen Webster use even as kind of a superlative. So he quickly, even instantaneously. I wouldn't kind of do that myself, but maybe it's a Canadian thing, I'm not sure. But that is a conjunction you could use. With adjectives, you've got and, yet, or but, even. However, with adjectives, you can also have a comma or nothing at all, right? So if you have bright blue, you'd never say the bright and blue balloon. You'd say the bright blue. It's cumulative, so you just don't use anything. Whereas if you said the hardworking, industrious boy, then you might put hardworking and industrious because they could be one without the other. They're not cumulative. There's a whole section of grammar having to do with comma use that I don't yet claim to have mastered. We do have some points in here for you as well. And I would recommend, honestly, if you're serious about teaching writing, get yourself a book of English usage. There's two big ones, Merriam-Webster. The other one is Fowler's. Fowler's is the more British version, but English usage books are essentially the case study. They're the Supreme Court decisions about how and why things should be done the way they're done, how words should or should not be used, proper punctuation, and they basically give you the standard based on what's been done in the past, precedent. So there's one more advanced dress-up that I'll mention. Again, optional, you don't have to teach it, but it's the noun clause. And this is when we would use the word that to indicate the thing that someone said or thought or believed. If you check on page 187, you'll see this example. The king of beasts never imagined that a puny rodent could help him. What was the thing the king of beasts never imagined? That a puny rodent could help him. So that becomes a noun clause. That a puny rodent could help him is a thing which can be believed or thought or said or held. The noun clause seems to be limited mostly to distinctly human activities, because animals don't believe or say things unless they're characters in a fable. So it works kind of with distinctly human activities, and you can have an invisible that, because you don't have to have the that to create a noun clause. Look at the sample. Midas thought that nothing could be grander than the golden touch, right? That's the thing he thought. But you could also take out the that, and you just have it as a direct object clause. Midas thought nothing could be grander than the golden touch. Do you see? So I show the kids how that creates this thing. You could put it on the checklist as an advanced dress-up if you like. And then you could also show them how to take it out and it still holds its form as a noun clause. And the last thing I'll mention, and then we'll break for the day, is language does change. There are things that we grew up with that we might believe, but they might not be true anymore, or maybe they never were. I mentioned never start a sentence with the word because. A lot of people have that in the back of their brain. How about this one? Never end a sentence in a preposition. You've heard that? Well, the problem is sometimes you just have to. Winston Churchill said this about that. This is the sort of pedantry up with which I will not put. See, to say that in natural English, you'd have to say, this is the sort of thing I will not put up with, thereby ending with two prepositions. And it's never been a rule of English per se. You should never do it in Latin or French, right? But English is not its own language. It's a battle between 4 or 5 different linguistic spelling grammar systems. To say it in English without ending in a preposition or sounding ridiculous, you just switch to French and say, this is the sort of pedantry I will not tolerate or I will not endure. But put up with is a short little idiom, and so that's... How about this one? I bet you learned this one. Don't split an infinitive. You learned that one? You know what an infinitive is? To go, to eat, right? Well, you're not supposed to, at least until the year 2000, you weren't supposed to put a word in between the to and the verb. So until the year 2000, it would have been technically illegal to write, it is polite to noisily slurp your noodles in Japan, which is true, by the way. If you ever go to Japan and eat ramen, slurp the noodles, because then whoever gave them to you will know that you're enjoying them. It's the polite thing to do. But to noisily slurp would be a split infinitive. But you see, it's an old rule. It changed. In the year 2000, the Merriam-Webster Dictionary came out with an official statement. It is acceptable, for purposes of clarity, to split an infinitive. And I know how this changed. One man did it. Gene Roddenberry. To boldly go where no man has gone before. So what happened in the year 2000? Who is writing the dictionaries? The middle-aged guys, the 40-somethings, 50, right? What were we doing 40 years ago? Watching Star Trek reruns every afternoon at 5 o'clock. For years, we were instructed by the television to boldly go. You bet we're going to grow up and change the rules of English, right? So I always say to kids, when I'm explaining a grammar thing, I always say, look, this is what I believe, this is what I think it is to the best of my knowledge and research. But things change. And you may meet a teacher who is firmly convinced that you should or should not do something. And in that situation, that's the truth. You may meet another teacher who says, do it this way. That's the truth. So, you know, the rules, the truth of English grammar, it's kind of constantly in flux. And there will always be people who cling to traditionalism and eschew any change. And there will always be people who want to push the envelope of what can be done, right? And we as teachers have to help children navigate both ends of that, right? So, but a book of English usage is very helpful because then you can solve some of your points you're confused on. Not to get overwhelmed with too much in the way of advanced grammar stuff. Some of you are looking a little glazed over right now. But just study the notes we have for you if you need to. Consider getting a book of English usage. And then if you really want an answer to some grammar question, we have a team of people who have been answering grammar questions, especially pertaining to the syllabus of stylistic techniques, for many years, and we're really happy to help you. Give us a call, visit our forum on the website, send an email, and we'll be sure no reasonable question goes unanswered. So that's our goal. Well, it's been a long day. I am extraordinarily grateful for your attentiveness and patience and continuing to smile, and we will hope you have time to finish up that homework if you didn't get it finished already, and we will reconvene in the morning to charge into Unit 7, 8, and 9 for the last day of our seminar. God bless you.